standing in line for Frederick the Great and his lovely little palace. Guided tours start here every 5 minutes in the summer. There's a lot of demand, and if you don't book online or get up early, you won't get in. Frederick was an early riser too. He was a hard worker, disciplined, a Prussian through and through. But he also had a cultural side. He was a musician and philosopher. They say you can't get closer to Frederick the Great than in Souci. It's the most personal of his palaces. The palace graces the hillside on which it was built. The nearby windmill was already here in 1743 when King Frederick and his court stopped here for a break. This idyllic landscape pleased the young monarch, and he decided to build his new summer palace here. Frederick sketched out his ideas to his architect Hans-Georg Wenceslaus von Knobelsdorff, a large entrance, a small palace, and a terraced vineyard. Knobelsdorff objected.
Knobelsdorff believed from the start that the palace needed another floor to make it higher and more imposing. But Frederick insisted. He wanted to be able to walk straight out into the garden.
The king got his way, and only one floor was built. The Rococo-style building has only 12 rooms. Back then, as now, visitors enter the palace through the lobby. And that leads to the marble hall, the main reception hall. But there were no lively balls here. Women were not welcome at the palace. But Frederick did invite leading intellectuals for his legendary round-table discussions. Voltaire, the leading mind of the French Enlightenment, was a frequent guest here. Frederick loved spending time in his library. He had more than 2,000 books. Not one of them was in German. His mastery of the language was inadequate. French was the language of the royal court. Souci is a much more intimate building than the Baroque palaces that other monarchs were building at the time.
In the 18th century, what impressed people was the palace's comparative modesty, that this great war hero should live so simply. They were also impressed that there were no guards. Within limits, it was a public building. People could look through the windows or walk through the garden. This was in stark contrast to other 18th century courts.
Maybe visitors back then would have seen the king playing his flute in his music room. He practiced every day. He also composed symphonies and other pieces, which were performed by small chamber orchestras. Frederick on the flute, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach on the harpsichord. Frederick dedicated himself to music and philosophy while at Souci. He spent almost 40 summers here, from April to October. But he never did see the great fountains working. His gardeners were unable to master the technology. Otherwise, he had reason to be pleased with the gardens, with the flowers and the fruits and vegetables.
There used to be apple and pear trees where the trained yew trees are now. And there were real walnut and sweet chestnut trees next to the vineyard. There were pineapples and strawberries. And as you can see behind me, the vines and figs were behind glass, so that the fruit could be harvested earlier.
Frederick only grew grapes for eating. He preferred drinking French wine. There were no potatoes either. He ordered them to be grown in the Prussian countryside, but they did not end up on his table. In 1786, Frederick died. His final wish was not granted until more than 200 years later. In 1991, he was reburied together with his 11 greyhounds on the terrace at the foot of his beloved palace.
Sagte, jeder kann in meinem Staate nach seiner Fasson selig werden. Auch dies war Potsdam. Cäcilienhof 1945. Und dieses KGB-Gefängnis in Potsdam hatte einen besonders schlechten Ruf. Und diese 3 Makabritäten keinen besseren. Sie hatte keinen Brief ihres Vaters mehr erhalten. Doch die Jahre gehen dahin, und wir Deutschen haben uns mit unseren sowjetischen Mitmenschen ausgesöhnt und leben heute in gut europäischer, indirekter Nachbarschaft. Man sieht es an den verschiedenen freundschaftlichen Begebenheiten auf diesen Bildern. Auch Manfred Kugel und Paul Peiseler tranken unter Begleitung dieses Flötisten auf die schönen Dinge des Lebens und auf die neue europäische Allianz. Möge das Souci von Friedrich dem Großen obsiegen.